We have Michael Mann in the studio this morning as a climatologist from the US answering your questions on climate change, on climatology. We've got a question here from Felicity in Grafton. Felicity, what's your question?
Hey, I just wanted to know how scientists know what the temperature was in years before temperature records began.
Yeah, great question, and I guess I'm the right person to answer it because that is the work that we did that led to the so-called hockey stick curve. What we do is, when you go back more than about a century and a half, and if you go that far back, there's still fairly widespread thermometer measurements, and so we can estimate how temperatures have changed around the planet with those measurements. But once you go back further, you lose those thermometer measurements, so you're turning to what we call proxy data. These are things like tree rings and corals and ice cores that something about their chemical or physical behavior actually records what's happening in the environment. It actually gives you some clues into what was happening from a climate perspective. And you can take all of these records from around the planet, put them together, and it gives you a picture. A picture emerges of how temperature patterns and rainfall patterns changed in the more distant past.
Would one example be the isotopes of oxygen, which are 16 and 18, and the 18 one is heavier and doesn't evaporate as well?
That's exactly right. One of the things you can look at, and ice is made up, H2O, water is H2O, so there are oxygen atoms in there, and you can look at the ratio of the two stable isotopes of oxygen, the 18 and the 16, and it tells you something about the temperature at the time the ice was deposited.
Wow.
Similar thing with corals. Calcium carbonate, there's oxygen in there, and the carbonate structure of the coral actually records something about the seawater that coral grew in, its temperature, its salinity, so you can take all that information.
So you were able to push back the records from originally, 100 years? How far back have you got your proxies going?
Well, we went back 1,000 years, again, about 2 decades ago. That's as far back as we could go. But other researchers now using more extensive data sets, again, it's 2 decades later, so there's been a lot more work in this area. We can now reconstruct these temperature patterns back tens of thousands of years, and the recent warming spike remains unprecedented as far back as we can go.
That's fascinating.